A very good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of you, depending on what time zone you have logged in from. And welcome to the second episode of Aqua Talks, a platform on thought leadership in the area of water, wherein we invite experts from industry, academia, government, civil societies, NGOs to give their views on water related issues. This initiative is brought to you by Maitri Aquatech, the company which generates water on a sustainable and a highly scalable basis. The topic for this round of Aqua Talks is future demand of water. Are existing resources and efforts enough? And we have a very distinguished panel of experts from different parts of the globe. The distinguished panel include Neeta Pokral from Asian Development Bank, Manila. Neeta is currently the unit head of project administration in South Asia Urban and Water Division of the Asian Development Bank. An engineer by training, she has over 24 years of professional experience working with large organizations such as ADB, Bovis Land Lease in Australia, engineering consulting firms, water utilities, and international non-government organizations. Her work focus has been in planning, design, and construction of large-scale urban and rural infrastructure projects, institutional and urban governance platforms, and introduction of private-public partnership for better water and urban services delivery in developing countries. We also have Kalpana Naresh, fondly known as the Water Lady of Hyderabad. Kalpana is an interior designer by profession with a background in architecture. This Hyderabad based water conservationist has set the Live the Lakes campaign as a core member of SAHI, which is an NGO. She has also led the 10,000 K boards initiative and various community building initiatives on several lakes across the city. Her current social startup, the Rainwater Project, provides sustainable integrated water management solutions in public and private sectors, along with lake and well restoration and conservation. She played an active role in the Hyderabad Design Forum, HDF's Stepwell Documentation Initiative. As a core member of Blue Hyderabad, in collaboration with various organizations, she's worked on restoring the dead Kundi Kunta Lake. The quality of water, the environment of the lake vicinity has improved significantly over the last 3 years. Her brainchild, the Blue Hyderabad campaign, was recently launched in a national platform. Kalpana is also one of the 7 women honored on World Women's Day to take over the Prime Minister's social media handles for a cause. Our third guest for today is Chetan Chaudhary, Advisor PM Office of UAE. Chetan is a strategy and public policy professional with an extensive background in government and management consultancy in US, Canada, and UAE in the areas of innovation, service design, digitalization, social entrepreneurship, and business transformation. Currently, he is an advisor with the Prime Minister's Office of the UAE in Dubai, where he leads efforts to promote innovative solutions across the federal government. Chetan co-founded and ran a for-profit social enterprise which worked towards improving the quality of education at the bottom of the pyramid in India through a series of innovative programs. He's an active angel investor and also works with some startups as a mentor. Chetan is also on the advisory board of Maitri Aquatech. Along with the panelists, I have my colleagues, Mr. Sanjay Bobde and Karthik. So I think let's move ahead, and I would like to request Kalpana to share her thoughts, initial thoughts on the topic. Thanks. Kalpana, moving to you.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. It's a wonderful opportunity to speak, and I think have we done enough for our sector.
Kalpana, if you want, you can put the video on since
I
you're
began
traveling.
working for water.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that. Yeah. So you can start sharing the slide, Naveen. Slides,
Sure,
Naveen.
sure.
I'll actually start with sharing my journey. Um, it's a story of how I was wanting to do something for water, but I found an opportunity and I created a platform for myself and I started working and I'm still working. It's been a few years now. So the whole thing began when we moved from US in 2000 to Hyderabad, and we've stayed in several communities, and that's why my first slide says, how communities are, how you manage your resources is what our future is really dependent on. And I really call this the last mile for water. The UN also calls this the last decade where you can So when we moved to Hyderabad, we've lived in various communities in Hyderabad, and the only thing I could see was we're managing tankers for more than few months in a year, and nobody is thinking of. Everyone seems to only understand the tap and the tanker. Can we move to the next slide, Naveen? Yeah. So my journey really started here when I was trying, to work with other communities to think water positive. While it was not fully, I couldn't enable it in several communities. So we started off with our own home, where we wanted to make this a sustainable home and a tanker-free home. And you see the courtyard there. Is all is it anything, but water is so important, and what do we do with the rainwater? We go tanker free. So in the beginning, we don't know if we're going to go tanker free, but courtyard's basement became a sump to hold rainwater, and we also did gray recycling about 10 years ago, where we are, we grow a lot. I mean, we grow our own vegetables. We have quite a green space around the house. So we thought gray recycling would help take care of the plants throughout the year. And the rainwater, we just didn't want to waste even one drop. So everything gets filtered in a cold chamber and gets stored in the sump, and it's served as a water bank throughout the year. Now, just by doing this, we saw that our dependability on tanker has, completely erased, and it's been about 10 years plus now. We don't buy tankers in a very tanker-prone area. We live in the central business district, which is the high-tech city of Hyderabad, and we really don't buy a single tanker for last 10 years. So we've done something right here. Then I moved on to our community, and we've done several rainwater harvesting, interventions in the community. And I can proudly say, last 5.5, 6 years, the community also we didn't buy a single common tanker. Earlier, we used to buy common tanker and distribute it to homes over several months. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So this sort of set ground for me that okay, I proved something for my own self and then the community. So what next? When I was looking at that, so I was running a design studio. So several of my clients, it could be factories, it could be homes, it could be corporate houses, but I started doing rainwater harvesting wherever I could, and almost in all my network, of people that ran schools, the institutions that I knew. So started kind of seeding this campaign that that yourself. Can we go to the next slide? I also realized lakes are largest catchment for rainwater, and they are in a very, very sorry state. So we really had to do something about it. Karthik, can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So this is all the innovation we did in our own. We actually went down to thinking that it's not rainwater harvesting is not innovative anymore. We're doing methods, and we started seeing that this also needs innovation. So what are the different methods that we can innovate in urban challenging space?
Hello, Kalpana. We can't hear you.
Yeah, yeah, Karthik.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, you're back. Yeah, we can hear you now. Thanks.
Yeah. So basically, I started working on the lake, and here are the first pictures of the lake. I mean, really sad. And when I looked at the lake on the first day, I didn't even know where to begin and how to work on this. And my friends started making fun of me. I mean, really, are you going to pick up this lake and work? But I was very determined that I should do something about this. A lot of floating garbage. You could see. Everything, literally clothes to dead animals to market waste to uh, you know uh, hospital waste, and literally everything that you could find. The next slide, please. So it was very heart wrenching to see what our water bodies have come down to, and how we litter, and how that much sewage is coming into the lake. Karthik, next slide, please. So the current state of urban lakes was not really great, and I started visiting many more lakes, and this was pretty much the status of the 162 lakes that are left with. So when can you go to the previous slide, please? So what I did was I started building the community around the lake. Karthik, can you go to the previous slide? Thank you. So when I
Yeah, I
started
think there's a
building
little.
community, yeah, you can just go to the previous slide, Naveen. So when we started, working on this lake, I had to innovate even how, the uh, cleanups has to be done. So we did interesting cleanups like kayaking and cleanups, and where I had to get people into the game somehow. And on the left hand side of the slide, you see I removed a lot of sewage lines that were directly put by communities into the lake. When I say communities, it's the builders who have built it. So they did remove these, and it was all done with awareness that otherwise it's going to come back to you as disease. And there were several innovations we did, like solar powered underwater aeration systems, and we set up custom made stainless steel drain screens at the inlets. There were 12 inlets to this lake. I erased all these inlets and brought it down to one single inlet, which was also the stormwater inlet. Just by doing this, the water started looking clean, and we got birds back to the lake. So whether people acknowledged it much or not, I could see birds come back. And this community support, initially, like when I say the first cleanup was organized, I expected at least 50 people to come, and none turned up. So it was extremely disappointing, but I did not give up. So I can proudly say from the day one when there was zero support, today, there are more than 10,000 people that stand up and support me for this initiative and will come along. So it's just that sticking to the game, making them understand, getting the awareness and the trust building, like, see, this can work. And all these interventions and, pitching for CSR, getting these improvements done on the lake, all this has done a big change in terms of health, So only two things resonate with the urban crowd, I realized. One is health and one is wealth. So when I say that the real estate properties are going to, get better if you have a cleaner surrounding, that is something that resonates. And health, of course. Next slide, please. While I was working on rainwater harvesting in different areas, into the low end, you get to connect, and different people need different kinds of awareness, because what I talk to the very high end community is not what I can talk to a slum guy to work with me for the lake. So when it comes to the lower people from the slums, you need to handhold them in a certain way, and when you help them with their other difficulties, they come together to help you with the lake. So these are things that I understood, and these were learnings. But while I'm doing all this, I really thought this is barely enough. Like the crisis, what we see is much, much bigger. Next slide, please. Yeah, so you know all the global patterns, problems with water. I don't have to repeat this, but definitely I saw the initiative aligning with many of the UN goals, and I also started following the contamination, the groundwater contamination maps, the fluoride maps, and there were traces of fluoride in several parts of the city owing to industrial contamination, some geological contamination because you've gone to unprecedented depths, and also the cities today, including Hyderabad, imports water from 200 kilometers away. When I say 200 kilometers away, we started well with 30 kilometers. In 70s, we went about 70 kilometers away to Singur and Manjira. Then we went 2004 to Nagarjuna Sagar Reservoir. We were done with phase 1, 2, 3. And then by the time it was 2014, we touched the Krishna and Godavari beds. So the point is, we are traveling for water because we are not sustainable. And it is scary beyond Krishna and Godavari. Where do you go next? It's only the sea, which is 600 kilometers away. And obviously, that's not affordable. To get lift irrigation water from 200 kilometers away is huge cost to the government for thousands of crores in O&M, monthly, which is your tax money. And then the city spends, I mean, it's our money that we spend on tankers nearly half the year, every year. So how smart are we is a question always that, pops up. So my only reasoning was, well, if we could work in a decentralized way, just like how I worked on my home and a community, in a localized manner, you can create the impact. You can manage your water better with an integrated approach. Next slide, please. Karthik, next slide. Yeah, so this is what you can see with our city of Hyderabad. You can see what urbanization levels are going to be from 2020 to 2050. If the population doubles, are we going to erase water from rivers, which we're getting today from 200 kilometers? How long is it going to last for us? These are questions all of us need to ask and think, because we have to look at what is the kind of growth rate, and we are already over extracted as a city. I mean, most of our city, about 70% plus, is over extracted and over mined in terms of groundwater. So there's no way of putting back this water, and urbanization, urban planning is really not connected with the water stories, I feel. It's not, we are erasing streams, we are filling up our wells, our lakes are in a bad condition, we've encroached the lake, there's no way to for the water to reach the lakes today. And we suffer urban floods, we suffer urban floods year after year. And summers, we keep buying tankers. So we've never broken this cycle really. And the chances in future, if you look at the future, with higher population and more urbanization, you're only looking at a very, very bleak future for water. So a Cape Town situation is definitely going to happen. I mean, if you're going to work this way, that's definitely going to happen. So it scares me that we don't want to go there. I mean, how do we avoid this? So we need to create a large level awareness, especially in the educated communities. Also, we don't see this kind of awareness. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I started understanding a little bit in a localized way what is water in a certain area where we live. And this is what you find in every zone. You find vanishing streams, you find heavy groundwater contamination, and it's a very tanker driven city. Urban floods, I mean, I don't have to speak about it. You know what happened in Hyderabad a few months ago. So, but I thought, however, I'm working the Save 10K boards, the Live the Lakes initiative, where I'm picking few lakes and working on rainwater harvesting here and there, all sounded like a piecemeal kind of a job. So, how do I work with an approach, with a citywide approach? I mean, that's what is required right now. We don't have much time and we have to work at a city level. Next slide, please. So we did a little case study about an area called Madhapur in Hyderabad. So this has a lot of floating population, and let's say about in a 1 square kilometer you will find 40,000 plus people living, which is very densely populated. If you see the number of rooftops here, the rooftops are enough to sustain, get water for the entire population, maybe 80% of the population for the whole year just from rainwater, or maybe more than that. But just this area spends 22 crores on water over few months in a year. So this begins a debate that how are we going to sustain ourselves? I mean, we have this much water, and rainwater is the purest of water that you can have today, with minimum filtering, and you can infuse it with minerals, and this is really the cleanest water available today. But this is being sent to drains, and we're buying tankers, and we suffer water for months, and we also suffer urban floods. What if all we come together collectively and do rainwater harvesting diligently? Either you store it or recharge it. Then you can reduce a huge amount of urban floods that happens in this area. Next slide, please. So we have enough, and we don't know how to manage it. Is what is the understanding from this case study. So what I decided is fixing one basin at a time. Now, last year the Niti Aayog report said 21 cities are running out of water. Did you see any action kick in from the government or any other agency? So I didn't see, but it bothered me so much that how can we be quiet? I mean, hearing this, it's a national report that said you are going to be running out of groundwater, and we can see all the groundwater streams erasing. It's just whenever you have rains, the shallow aquifers kind of pull up, but the deep aquifers where we actually draw water from are going bone dry. So a sort of desertification is happening at the deeper levels. So fixing one basin or one block at a time seemed the way to go with a citywide approach. So I approached Triple IT Hyderabad. Then there's a startup called Kainos who worked with Mission Kakatiya and Mission Bhagirath. They helped me break down the city into 98 small blocks, 98 micro watersheds, because I wanted the city to be broken into smaller blocks so I can create this localized action for water. My inspiration, can we move to the next slide, please? My inspiration is the super block model from Barcelona. It's a very successful model they had used for um, can we move to the next slide, please? I guess I'm not audible anymore. Yeah, so this is breaking down the city into 98 blocks. Can we move to the next slide? When we divided these 98 blocks, I started focusing on one block. And we started zoning this block. I mean, what kind of interventions need to be done in which part of this block. So where are the confined aquifers, where are the unconfined aquifers, where are the flooding zones, and which are the green zones, and what are the different types of interventions that we could do. So collected communities around this block, started talking to schools, religious institutions, corporates, builders, slums, and 7 different communities, colonies around the lake, because I already knew these communities. We started doing something like a public participatory action. I got a small grant from HDFC around this time for this initiative. Well, we had money to do only 20 injection bores, which are recharge bore wells, where we could take water down in the common areas of these colonies around the lakes. We made a public participatory action where we did 2 bores, and we asked the community to do that. We could do about injection bore, and this would take a lot of water into the ground, and also talking to communities about storing the rainwater and using the dead bore wells also is something we did. And it was a very big success story, because we were connected to communities and they are realizing the importance of water, and already we are seeing many people calling us. The kind of efforts that is being done, they're already seeing the results. Many of the non-working boards or defunct boards have started to work, and many colony presidents have called us and told us. Many schools, the boards are working well. We did rainwater harvesting in parks as well. So we sort of, looked at the whole area in terms of water. Around this time is when we also saved a large diameter irrigation well, which I found when we were distributing milk for COVID to small children. I found this large well and it looked like a well. I went near and I, again, a huge amount of garbage dumped in it. Can we move to the next slide, please? So in this one block, we rejuvenated a lake, and we restored a well, and we started working with communities for common area rainwater harvesting. Karthik, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so we started driving action. We marked the points where we have to do these simple interventions, where we have a recharge bell, and we created a collection point around it. On streets where we identified where there's a lot of water that it could capture. And since it was a flood, most of them actually took a lot of water and also came to a point of saturation because it couldn't take anymore. But it has reflected on many bores that were not working. And these are the interventions we did in several colonies around. So keeping the water body, as in the lake, as the fulcrum to this activity, we picked up rainwater harvesting around the lake. Next slide, please. Karthik, next slide, please.
Some type of delay over here.
Yeah, just move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, I can't see the next slide, but anyway, I will. Yeah, so this is the first block, and you can see we worked on these large couple of wells there. We worked on a lake. We did these common area rainwater harvesting. So we sort of started working on the entire block. This is a 10 square kilometer stretch of a block. We've already covered more than half the block. We still have to work on the block, but the kind of impact that we had created, this basically is improving the lives of 3 lakh people that are living around this in this block. You can see the how the lake was and how it has become now. You can see how the well was and it has become. So it is also not just water security, but improving air quality index, improving the water, I mean the soil quality, improving groundwater levels. So this well that we have restored saved 13 lakh liters through the flood. The 13 lakh liters otherwise would have been on the streets as urban flood. Now this has nicely gone into the ground and did a beautiful groundwater recharge for this zone around it. So this is like a fantastic story where you need these collection points today. So wells and step wells is something we really give a lot of importance, and we take it up for restoration today. Next slide, please. So while doing this, we had like very good success stories. We had like a lot of bores rejuvenated. We were starting to create tanker-free societies, schools, temples, churches. We worked with every kind of institution, even including institutions, large educational institutions as well. So we've reached more than 6 million people in the city. With awareness. I mean, a lot of media had captured all our stories for water in for rejuvenation, the step well rejuvenation. Um, it kind of caught up, and we created something called the Blue Hyderabad campaign. So we started creating groups across the city in various blocks. So we have Blue Nizampet, Blue Miapur, Blue Sainikpuri, Blue Ishwarpuri. So we have a lot of Blue Hyderabad volunteers, and we started talking these stories to them. So they slowly start working with in their own blocks, and we also have connected to a municipality where we are telling them to make our volunteers as social auditors for rainwater harvesting, where they'll go and give direct awareness to people and also give them the technical knowledge, and we will handhold them and get more and more people to do rainwater harvesting, because most of them don't even follow compliance. So when we become social auditors, we can actually encourage them to do this in a very non-confrontational way. So that way we will start telling them stories of how they can be the beneficiaries, and they are the beneficiaries. Next slide, please. Yeah, while doing this, we support hundreds of livelihoods while restoring groundwater table. We have several projects, including your, restoration of wells, in making rainwater harvesting pits, and you can see that we have created a small amphitheater around this well, making it interesting public spaces. So all this doesn't need highly skilled labor. I mean, to lay out a roadmap, we need a lot of analysts, but on the ground, we just train these people on ground and skill them up and then give them work. So post COVID, there were several people who were struggling for jobs, and we were able to give livelihoods for several people. So that's been a really a big win for us, and many people who we helped through COVID, giving them food and stuff. We would request them to come and work for us, and they're more than ready to come and be part of our journeys. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what we talk to everybody. So you can become a champion in your own block. So this is nothing but creating a local action for water, because it's high time we did something for water, and each one of us needs to do something. It's not just the government, because look at our population. I think we should smartly use the sheer numbers to create an impact, right? More people into the game, more impact we are going to create. And in a very localized understanding. So in each block, we tell people what is the water available to you. We want to create these maps. We want to do a lot of, digital platforms where somebody can go and understand in their own block what is the situation of water and what they can do, and how they can be part and educate them also. We've also created a content for rainwater harvesting, a kind of 5-session coursework for schools that they can be part of, and we are part of several webinars in colleges and institutions where there is a call for action to students to come up and innovate. They can create a lot of IoT systems, create a kind of dashboard for all the bore wells that are being dug. Nobody has a clue how many bore wells do we have, how much water do we suck, and how much water do we actually put back. No one has a clue. So creating these dashboards, collecting data, these are things we keep inviting students to innovate for us. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what we do, several campaigns, challenges, and pull up action constantly, right? From the cheapest method of doing rainwater harvesting to the most innovative maintenance methods like modular rainwater harvesting today, and getting children into the game, getting more plantation of trees, and the right way to plant, the right way to uh, you know um, give water to the plants so that we don't waste water. So all these are several challenges that we keep on coming up with and innovating, because we don't want people to forget this. And they remember rainwater harvesting only when it rains, but now we are campaigning saying that you keep your buildings rain ready even before it rains. So we're also working with the government with several proposals that we keep giving them. Recently, we are working with the government to create rainwater harvesting solutions under flyovers and stuff, where there's a lot of clean water that comes from the flyovers. It just needs some basic filtering and it can be sent to the ground. So otherwise, it just increases the urban flood multifold with all these flyovers that hold a lot of water. Also, well restorations, lake restorations. We want to partner with the government as well, and take this impact broad and wide. While we don't know how much we will achieve with the government, but definitely they do partner with us, as in giving us permissions to do all the work that we do. And I think each one of us can be the change. If I could start with a sustainable home and come to working on a city-wide level, I think in each of us do our bit. It's not just our right today water, it's also our duty. If we start thinking like this, I think we can create a fantastic future, especially for our future generations, because I always worry about the future generations. We can't erase everything and give nothing to them, and we really have to be mindful of this. Thank you so much. I think I've come to the end of my presentation now.
Thank you, Kalpana. This was truly inspiring. This phenomenal work which is being done by you. Truly, truly, truly very, very inspiring for all of us. And like you,
Thank
each
you.
of us needs to do our bit to make a difference for the future generation. I'd like to
Thank you so
invite
much, Naveen.
Neeta to, to say to give her views on the topic.
Thank you, Naveen. Yes, truly inspiring, Kalpana. I don't know how I will match that. I won't attempt to match that. Again, my name is Neeta Pokhrel. I work with the Asian Development Bank's South Asia Urban and Water Division. We cover 6 countries, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and India. India is our largest client. And my division, again, we fund, I'm with the sovereign side of Asian Development Bank. We do have a private sector department that does fund private sector projects that, of course, they look at different aspects of bankability and so on, whereas we are purely working with the government predominantly, but of course our partners are multifolds. We work in very large projects to very small community-based projects. We fund thousands of farmers to shift their groundwater pumps into solar pumps. So no scale, there's no scale of what we fund, but with a sovereign side where I work, of course, our partners are always government who we sign our agreement with. Then with that, the NGOs, the contractors, the consultants, the whole gamut of stakeholders are there. With that, I think Kalpana has already laid a nice scarcity situation, the projects that local level activism, local level resource mobilization, local level mind mobilization can do. So where I would say with ADB, where we come in is we are not only financiers, we are predominantly financiers, but we are development financiers. We are also enablers and influencers of our stakeholders. So we take that quite seriously. The way we come in is we look at how we can create that enabling environment. So all large scale projects that government must fund, cities must have large scale service delivery. At the same time, have that enabling environment where all resource mobilization, mind mobilization, private and public, citizens and governments can thrive. And that is really our focus these days. I think the question you have posed, Naveen, is already self-answered. I won't delve in that. That is why we are here talking. And there is extreme water scarcity. India, I mean, I see a lot of Indian names in the participation. So I would focus India now. Out of all our clients. But of course, the scale of water security is similar. We are living in an extremely vulnerable situation. And these days, when we talk about water security, we don't just look at the nexus, the traditional food, energy, water nexus. We look much more indicators of dimensions of water security, the economic, the environment, the livelihood, the disaster related water security. So recently, I'll invite you to look at a publication we put out called it's called ADB, Asian Water Development Outlook 2020. It's fresh off the press. I can post the link when I finish talking in the chat box. So you can go to the website. It was launched in January. We do this every 2-3 years, where again, we look at all our client or developing member countries' water security situation we have used 5 key dimensions here, the rural water security, urban water security, water related disaster security, economic water security, and environmental water security. So please do look at that. You will see how we use data publicly available that government and established stakeholders put out. And we compare that, the progress that the governments have made in all these key dimensions. So again, coming back to the challenges of ensuring future demand is not only looked at from, what Kalpana said. I mean, of course, needless to say, we all know India is using 1/3 of global groundwater resources, 1/3. And when you look at agriculture, which uses 90% of its resources, entire water resources, global average is about 70%. In India's case, is 90%, which of course, when we want water security, we need to shift that to other demands, to drinking, to industrial, because India is growing, it will continue to grow. And the paradox is we have to keep producing food. And globally, our estimates show, global other stakeholders' estimates show that we must produce something like 70% more food with something like 40% less water that we're using for agriculture. Others I won't even go, because otherwise I'll take too long. So this is where we're at. We need to balance, how do we use water efficiently in all subsectors of water? How do we leapfrog? How do we digitize? How do we mobilize? How do we mobilize all resources we have? Cities, gram panchayats, what can they mobilize and fast? And the biggest challenge of all this productivity issue, we are not regulating groundwater. We have issues of subsidies, which again, no demand management. There is not willingness to pay. There's willingness to charge issue. A lot of our stakeholders don't want to charge for water. It is very politicized. So these are areas we in Asian Development Bank are always trying to bring out in all our projects. Sustainability is not just money. We don't give money anymore, actually. It's not just let's build this. Those days are gone. For all the multi development MDBs, all bilateral development partners like us, we do, and bigger spanner now, not just food energy equilibrium that we water professionals used to look at in past. There's another panel of climate change. 80% or more of climate change impact are manifested through water. So what are we doing? We are marching ahead, trying to meet our SDG targets. And here India is doing remarkably well. We are very proud of our biggest client, India, how they have gone on a mission mode. Again, people like Kalpana, people like Maitri, the private sector, public sector, NGOs, citizen groups. They are all. We see this new wave being catalyzed to get there faster. But how do we get there faster? With resilience. We build, but are our builders, our contractors who are building, putting those actions in the contracts? Are the plinths being raised really, or we just talking about it and going in this mission mode without having these? So these are a dialogue we have with our partners, and all of them are actually asking the same. All governments, actually, city governments we work with are on board. They're looking at it, but of course it is complex equilibrium. Everybody has a role. Government may not be getting there as fast as we think, but we see a huge change. I personally have been working in South Asia since 2003. When I left private sector in Australia, I moved back to Asia, where I come from. I'm from Nepal. And again, we all go through in our lives to say, I must go back, go home and do something there. And I went through the same. I have remained the same. I'll always remain in Asia. And I have seen huge shift. What Kalpana said, some of these that governments need to do what they do. All stakeholders I see personally in my 25-year journey are doing a lot more, but faster, better, more efficiently. Again, how do we really give the teeth for our municipalities to bite, to mobilize their land, mobilize anything else they have to really bring the PPP framework that they need? Can they next day, somebody like you come up with a great idea? Can they give you a contract? Is there the legal situation allows them to give you a contract? These are questions that we are trying to help governments answer, help private sector answer. We have made commitment that in Asian Development Bank by 2030, we will mobilize $80 billion in climate financing. We achieved our target we made of mobilizing climate financing of $6 billion by 2020 in 7 years. So that is resilience, building more resilient way. COVID-19 has brought this issue on forefront for building greener, bluer, better, the need to do so. Agriculture in advancement efficiency requires, it's difficult, but somebody wrote large scale, small scale. Again, you have to mobilize farmers. You have to look at efficient irrigation. You have to look at subsidies. Are the subsidies right? You have to look at maintenance. You can't just build and leave it. So these are multiple complex chain events, stakeholders. I think each one of us, as Kalpana says, have a role to play. And looking at, again, source sustainability from whatever, every drop, the crop it gives must be more efficient. Every drop in municipal drinking water, rural drinking water must have some demand management model. People must be aware they can't just open tap and leave it. And this is where we again struggle to say, if it's tariffs or transfers or taxes that pay, somebody is paying for it. But then are people aware that is not free? The pipes cost money, water is free, but as Kalpana says, we are also running out of that free water in the river. So I won't continue, but do please look at our publication, this one just off the press, called ADO, Asian Water Development Outlook. And what can I say? Again, I mean, the challenges of making every drop count by the government, by the private sector, by activists, by citizens. And we will continue play our role in not just, as I said, we don't just finance, we enable, we influence, we look at the sustainability of the money that has been mobilized. And we have in ADB, we have made 3 commitments as part of our strategy 2030, which is again this climate financing, the resilience part, mobilizing private financing. For every dollar that we put, we will look at financing of 25% of our portfolio should come from private sector, or every dollar that we put, $3 should come from other partners co-financing. So, and lastly, gender. It has to be inclusive. You can't put anything there which is not inclusive towards its citizens and women. One of my project that we are working is in West Bengal, and we have committed, government has committed 30% of all employment generated will go to women. It will be run, we cover 66 gram panchayats in West Bengal, and each of the gram panchayats have signed a new framework where we are building the capacity, we have provided grant funding, where we are training 2,000 plus women to be plumbers, to be accountants, to be meter readers, and all of that employment, minimum 30% will go to local women. So we remain committed in our commitments of inclusive, resilient, sustainable water security. So I stop here because I know we are very short of time and Chetan has to go next, but if you will, I will have to apologize because I have to leave in 7 minutes. But I'm always here. You send us emails. If not me, some colleague in Asian Development Bank will try to answer your queries. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to Maitri, and I look forward to hearing other panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Neeta. We'll quickly move to Chetan. Chetan, you could give your initial remarks, and then I think there will be a lot of questions all our participants would like to ask, so we could then move on to that, because I believe Neeta needs to move another 10 minutes, so we could probably address questions that which she needs to address. We could ask her first.
Okay, sure, Naveen. Thanks for putting this together. In fact, hearing my panelists, I think I'm tempted to say that this is. That we are water wise, but execution dumb, right? So we are looking at a biosphere problem and taking a very piecemeal approach to solving it. So, so yes, I'm starting on a grim note, but the crisis definitely is a massive crisis. So, for example, just to carry the grim picture forward, according to water.org, a child dies from a water-related disease every 2 minutes. So now suddenly we don't have a water crisis, we also have a health crisis, right? And then, taking these statistics forward just to set the context. In some countries, there are some countries like DR Congo, Papua New Guinea, Mozambique, Somalia, where less than half of the population does not have access to clean water. So what are we looking at? And now also look at the downstream impact, right? So 30% of biodiversity apparently has been lost due to our damage to water ecosystems, right? And then, of course, I read about some new research where because of water scarcity, some areas in Africa have seen increase in radicalization. So examples were given of areas impacted by Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, so where water has led to radicalization. So you see how the problem is perpetuating. So it is not just a single crisis we are looking at. It is multiple crises getting together. And then, of course, if you add in the considerations of our growing urban areas, and then, of course, climate change, bioenergy demands, it suddenly takes, assumes the shape of a wicked problem. And wicked problems are not very easy to solve. So, but of course, with all such concerns, I should also moderate it by saying that, I'm also a bit excited by what's going on in the whole water space with companies like you. And then also by the current steps which are being taken by multilateral agencies and the governments across the world. So as somebody having worked in strategy consulting and the government, I must talk about that aspect a bit, that, we've seen the crisis. We don't need to hammer home the fact that it is a massive and grave crisis which we have on our hand. And to use the analogy from a different crisis you're facing right now, I think it's time that massive interventions take place to flatten the curve for water, right? And here I think what could be done, I would just talk about a few steps which governments could take. And there are, of course, a lot of other stakeholders in play here, but I would only talk about governments. And the second biggest aspect, which I think could massively and drastically impact this whole space, is technology. And the power of technology we've seen. And what I'm excited about most is that in this whole domain, technologies are now coming out from the deceptive stage to being disruptive. And there are a lot of interventions which have happened on the technology side, which are taking this whole issue to the next level, right? So obviously we've heard of the Omni processor by Bill Gates, and I've read about the water filter book. I've read about the solar bags coming out of the US, and then there's the CO2 dyeing process. But what I'm most excited about is these emerging technologies, like what Maitri is putting out there, companies like Uaru are doing. And so there is still hope. Not everything is lost, but so what I must say is there's no drought of ideas. However, the thirst of implementing such change has to come from the government, because again, it's not only a health crisis, it is now taking the shape of a human rights crisis. And that's how governments need to intervene and do massive large scale interventions and implementations, so that this problem can be taken towards a proper solution, right? And again, we can talk about a lot of interventions. There's a philosophical discussion around how government should be able to protect the rights of citizens around water, and also respect water as a human rights issue as well, right? But taking that to the next stage, right? We know that the return on investment for safe water is massive. So why are we seeing a dearth of startups, big tech companies in this space? We don't have a SpaceX size company in the water space, right? But think of if you are able to bring those kinds of funding, or if let's think of the X Prize, if you are able to do those kind of interventions from the private sector side in the water space, imagine the ramifications of that. Imagine the number of technologies which would suddenly come into the whole space, right? Why do we only talk about CSR and impact investing when we talk about water companies? Why don't we talk about $200 million in funding from a private equity player in terms of water, right? NITA is doing amazing work through their multilateral effort at ADB, and there are a lot of other agencies which are obviously involved in this. But I think a massive push to take it to the next level, I think technology has to come into play along with interventions by the government. So you could always look at these cluster philosophies which are coming up. Why don't you have a water cluster? You have these software clusters and hardware clusters in countries. Every single country is thinking about the cluster economy. Do we have a water cluster anywhere? We don't. So and again, there's a lot of thought leadership happening around these new ideas. But I believe that if you are able to take it to the next level, you need to have more thought leaders, more tech millionaires and billionaires intervening in this space. You need the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos of the world to maybe come into the water space and say, and unite the new technologies which are coming together, right? And again, we can always talk about the government interventions, like, can you not set up a water authority, right? Do all the governments in the world, do they need a water authority? Do they need water clusters? Do they need government funding specifically for water? Do they need water ministries, for example? We have energy ministries, we have food security ministries, but do all countries which are facing water problems, do they have water ministries? So there are a lot of these type of ideas which can be brought about, right? So I'm again speaking from a government, wearing a government hat, right? So demand side and supply side both can be tackled massively by the government. So I think government has to take the lead, followed by the tech players. So I stop right there, and then of course we can take any questions and we can delve deeper into any of the ideas which you talked about.
Thanks a lot, Chetan. I'll now request Mr. Sanjay. I think Neeta had to leave. She had another meeting. Mr. Sanjay, if there are some questions you would like to take up, I see a lot of questions coming in from the participants as well. So if you want to ask the panelists, that would be nice. Handing over to Mr. Sanjay. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Naveen. And thanks to Kalpana ma'am and Neeta and Chetan also for sharing their thoughts and also the actions that Kalpana has done in Hyderabad, and Neeta, the leadership that she's providing, both of them actually. So local government and the larger leadership kind of. And Chetan is surely at the PM's level there in UAE. So actually we tried to put together the questions that have come from various participants and some questions that we also had vis-a-vis the areas and domains that you come from. So obviously, one of the first few questions were related to policies. So we tried to divide the questions in 4 parts in terms of government from policy point of view, public from public behavior and people behavior point of view, how habits need to be, etc. You did discuss in terms of whether it is a impact funding or it should be anyway a normal thing, in a normal industry kind of a situation. So from industry per se and from funding also, special funding that is. But from special funding related questions, Neeta could have answered, and some of those she did mention, and I hope we can find some answers in the document that she has shared, reference that she has shared. So specifically, I'll just from government per se, or the whole thing about water is that all of us very well are aware, like you said, water wise, but execution dumb. So everybody knows that there is a challenge, and a lot of times we find that people are very eager to look at the problem when the problem is hurting them. But come monsoon in India specifically, everybody just quietens down, and then we sort of postpone it by 4 to 6 months. So that typically happens. Kalpana did say that, the Niti Aayog published a report where 21 cities have a problem, but what actions? Hardly any actions are visible. So we do have that challenge in terms of the execution or action, or even the planning per se. So the first and foremost, so one of the critical things is like energy is metered and charged. Water is not metered and charged. What kind of policies need to be there to ensure that water is valued and hence it is metered and charged? Should we be, some of the thoughts that have come up is, should we be separating the needs or usages from natural versus man-made? Is there some way, is there some thinking going on at policy level? Something that maybe Chetan could share.
Sure. Very valid point, Sanjay. So I think, there has been precedence around this. So UK, for example, has taken the lead around this. Even Chile, so they went the whole privatization route. So they started asking all the water companies to meter the usage of water, and very extensive interventions from the government. And they were successful, obviously, to a certain extent. However, we must moderate it by saying that these were not all successful. And in most of these countries, most of these private sector or privatization initiatives had to be rolled back after a few years. So again, the argument was that, can market forces decide something which is bordering on a human rights issue, right? Governments have tried, and I read about a policy intervention you must have heard of the behavioral sciences being applied to government policies these days. So they study human behavior and see how this concept of nudging can help people towards better outcomes, right? So this has been tried by governments as well. And of course, water is one great area which it has already been tried on. Smart metering in homes and even metering in mostly in industrial contexts. However, the success has been limited. A lot of countries have had to roll back their initiatives. The good success stories obviously came out from Australia, for example, when they solved their whole millennium drought issue and they reduced the usage of water by 50% using these smart techniques, and metering was one of them. However, we must take it with a pinch of salt that should it happen? Yes, it should happen. Should I have even, for example, like a meter in my shower? Yes, I should, right? Because we've been taught that, oh, you should take a 2-minute shower, it wastes so many gallons of water. But have I seen a shower with a meter installed? That's again an example of nudge, right? If you have a shower with a meter installed and it tells me that, hey, you've used 20 gallons of water, which could maybe feed your entire household for 2 days, I would stop. But have those solutions been mainstreamed? Not yet. So I think these interventions are still at an experimental stage. They have been scaled up in pockets of activity. They have not yet been mainstreamed.
Okay. Now the next question is more from one of the statements that was made by our water minister recently, saying that you should not treat the rivers as the source of water. You should let the rivers flow, and then I don't know what he meant in terms of what should be the source of water, but then I'm sure that discussion, if we get on, then my point is a policy point of view. How should the usages be prioritized? Because urban versus rural conflict is there. Agriculture versus people. Whether the water drinking comes first, the food comes first, kind of thing. So obviously drinking water comes first, but then where do we start charging and how? Because I think those points are going to come soon in terms of while cities have a challenge, urbanization is happening very fast everywhere in India and I think places like UAE, etc. Also across Asia, across Africa also moving very fast on that. So how should it be? Again, it's a similar question, but the prioritization, how should it be prioritized or what sources should be seen? Because we do have the natural water as well as the desalination and then the AWG that Maitri specifically is involved in. So what is your thought? Is there some thought in terms of comparing water sources and looking at them differently?
Sanjay, you want me to take that?
Yeah. I don't know if Kalpana is there still. Kalpana, are you there? Go ahead, because I have a specific question for Kalpana also.
No, I think she's got disconnected.
Okay, Chetan, please.
Sure, yeah. See, I would start by saying, Sanjay, that even I think Neeta and Kalpana alluded to this fact. Only domestic water withdrawal represents, I think, about 10% of the global proportion, right? Agriculture accounts for 70% of global freshwater consumption.
Yes.
Right? So we know these facts. So obviously it has to be prioritized, right? You can go to Israel, a small country. They have declared water as a national security issue. So when you talk about this prioritization, I think Israel is a great case study. It's almost like the gold standard here, right? So they have now, so what they did was because of massive policy interventions, they now have 40% of their agriculture water supply coming from treated effluent water, right? That's massive compared to some other countries. And even desalination, they are the world leader in terms of the supply of water through desalination. 50% of their drinking water supply, I think, comes from desalinated water. And they are also able to recapture 80% of their, I think 85, 86% of their water. And the next country, which is second after Israel, is Spain. And you know how much they recapture? 19%. So imagine the gap. And this has happened because of very strong policy interventions. extremely proactive prioritization in terms of water capturing and water distribution, and then introducing measures around chargeability and pricing of water. So yes, there are case studies which can be looked at, and those can be replicated in different contexts of countries. Like I come from the UAE, right?
Yeah.
Here, desalination is a huge drain on the resources. So given the natural water supply of the country, it has to be prioritized, and that's how the water supply also has to be monitored. I should also just allude to the fact that, looking at bottled water these days, right? If you just look at domestic consumption, bottled water has just become a massive industry by itself. I think it's almost like $300 billion, estimated by about 2025 or something. So in 4 years, this industry is going to be $300+ billion. And in some cases, the profit margins are more than 150%. So, and that is only serving a really small percentage of the consumption in terms of domestic fresh water, right? So you can imagine the breadth of interventions which are required in, let's say, industrial and agricultural use. And that requires specific policies from the government of different countries. And yes, we do have case studies.
Thanks for that, Nitin. I think one specific question I had for Kalpana was related to the being an architect and designer. This building permission rules actually, and she did mention, because in terms of how building permission rules need to change so that water consumption and water management in urban is reorganized, and that is considered while designing buildings, is something that is not there as yet. And with the kind of challenges that we saw for Hyderabad, and obviously many other cities like Gurgaon and others, the metros, all the metros actually do have that challenge, and it needs to be quickly redressed. So I don't know, that was one question. Kalpana could have answered that to some extent, but there is need.
Can you just repeat? Can you repeat the question, Nathan?
Oh, okay. Kalpana, good to have you back. I was basically saying that, in terms of building permission rules, in building permission rules, you have some support now for the rainwater harvesting, right? Now, what further needs to happen in terms of water usage measurement, as well as, recharging, etc. I think also in terms of other options like atmospheric water generation, etc. People should have options available. So do you think that the design should need to change possibly? Because I know one problem: Bombay can take AWG, but they don't have space to put up AWG plants. Whereas places like Hyderabad may have place, but AWG will be at certain efficiency. So how the other water sources kind of thing should be adopted in designs, and then what kind of building permission rule changes should happen? Very open-ended question.
Well, building permissions as such, see, there is a compliance that if you have a 200 square yards or more space that you build on, you're supposed to do a rainwater harvesting field. But the sad thing is, it does not define how much of rainwater do you really, recharge or store, or what is it? I mean, now the central government is saying that try to save every drop of water in your rooftop, but there's no policy for that. It's basically manage your rainwater within your community is something they have to come down to. Because in the name of compliance, any type of pit is made, and how much recharge that happens in that is really negligible. And which is where we are building the awareness that actually you are the beneficiary. If I didn't buy tankers for 10 years, I have saved a few lakh rupees. So I'm the beneficiary.
Right.
So this is what we're trying to say. And of course, in places where there's a lot of groundwater contamination, where Maitri kind of technologies, the air to water, technology can be really there is no clean water. So either you rainwater and store it in a certain way, or I mean, what do you do after the rains are gone, right? So usually what we do in our house is we recharge also. We store the water and the excess rainwater goes to recharge. So our borewells work throughout the year. But that's not happening in most areas where there is either sheetrock or there's not enough recharge that can happen. So you can store rainwater and reuse maybe for a couple of happens to the rest of the year. That's where technologies like yours can actually work. And there's enough space on rooftops, where you can have your kind of, the Maitri, the machines, air to water machines that can be set up. So groundwater you can, still reduce the contamination, but you cannot remove the contamination. So there's huge policy changes that has to happen where people are discharging effluents into groundwater. I mean, I know factories which dig borewells into their factories and they're putting it to the ground. So when these kind of things happen, I think that the government should come down in a big way. Shut these factories down, and they have to be made responsible for what they do with their waste, and that is something that has to happen. Yeah, but technologies like yours are really useful here because we can balance. Like I said, there's many places where you cannot even recharge water anymore. All the wells are closed, the lakes are dirty with sewage, and these are leaching into the board systems. So it's really a shutdown in terms of drinking water. Other than bottled water that you buy, there's no other option here. Yeah, so government has to do a whole lot of things, but I think each one of us also can play a role. Like I said, the simple compliance, you don't have to do it just for the sake of authority. I mean, to get a sign from the authorities to build your structures, you can also look at it as, tapping every drop of rainwater, which would be so beneficial. And also we have to open our eyes to the environment around us. What's happening with our wells, what's happening with our lakes, how else to recharge groundwater in the common areas, things like that. So really a lot of work needs to happen. At a policy level, of course, a huge amount. But people expect subsidies, right? Many people ask me, what about subsidies for rainwater? But they did give subsidies, but that was misused. Most of them didn't do or did rainwater harvesting just like an eye wash thing. They didn't really use it to the full potential. And I think every community has enough money to do a rainwater harvesting thing. I don't think you need to even expect this subsidy because you, like I said, you are the beneficiary. You should just get it done. Many people ask me this question: if I do rainwater harvesting, is my neighbor going to benefit? My only answer is an entire water bowl, it's like a bowl of water. It's a public asset. You're drawing water from your borewell does not mean it's your water. So when you take water from the ground, you have to put water back into the ground diligently. It's a duty. You have to just do it, irrespective of what happens. And over time, when everyone does it collectively, the groundwater is going to improve. And we have several examples to showcase this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kalpana. I think the last question that I would like to ask, really a question or a point for discussion, actually, honestly. A lot of times, as you move into a new paradigm, the execution related machinery, which is otherwise not available, does get activated or created. So in this case, specifically for water, any thoughts on what kind of machinery needs to be there so that the water related execution is better from government side and community side? Any thoughts? Kalpana, from local government point of view, Chetan, in terms of national government or either from state governments,
Sanjay, I can go first quickly. So, see, at a federal or let's say at the top level of the government, I don't think it can be done just by the government. So, as Kalpana mentioned, right? So, yes, the policy interventions or the policy measures can be set by the government, right? But in terms of the execution machinery, I think that obviously is a multi-pronged problem. So it has to be done through multilateral agencies, because again, the water ecosystem is an extremely complex ecosystem, right? So if you start drawing it, I was just thinking into, when I was invited for this, I was just thinking in terms of the ecosystem. It's extremely complex and multiple players. So this whole execution machinery has to be put together through a multilateral effort, right? So government has to partner with private sector. So again, your standard PPP models have to come in place, but the agencies like UN and WEF and OECD, these have to come together at a really large level, right? So to create any sort of an execution difference across, like for example, the continent of Africa. How do you think each country can deal with it? They cannot deal with it in terms of isolated countries. It has to be done at multi-country levels, right? So you have to have this machinery, and the execution has to be provided by these agencies. Of course, NGOs have to be on the ground, so they have to get support from the government. And of course, the private companies have to provide the technology support as well. So all these parties have to come together. I think it's a very, very complex mechanism of getting this done. It is happening on the ground. I gave examples of UK, Australia, Israel, Spain. So there are countries who are trying to take it to the next level. So yes, we do have some success stories around this as well.
But sustenance is a little bit of an issue of a model which is really truly sustainable, because
I've not seen a really successful model. So UK went ahead, but they have to also roll back quite a bit of their initiatives around this.
Because I think human beings are so used to certain way of working with water, I think it's very difficult to accept certain shifts.
And just because of the fundamental nature of the problem, right? It's not like like a current crisis will go away. It's a fundamental. It's, again, people are calling it a human rights crisis, a health crisis. So it is almost becoming a fundamental right. It's like food, shelter, and housing, right? It's beyond that. It is bigger than that. So it just assumes so many other angles that it's not possible to just feel the pulse of the problem in one aspect.
Kalpana, you would like to say anything?
So I feel from a local level, see, I've been rallying with the government, doing a lot of work and showcasing it to them. But I don't see any serious kind of hand-holding from them because there's no political will, right? So it all happens when the politicians come forward. And working with them, really, I see so many challenges because the agendas kind of dilute, the cause itself can dilute, and government does not have mechanisms to build behavior change with people. I feel that connect they still don't have. The moment the government comes forward, if they're going to give a subsidy, fine, but otherwise everyone steps back actually. They don't have these mechanisms to build. And water itself, if you had to work for water, it's so connected with behavior change. You need to understand that it's an infinite, it's a finite resource and it's not an infinite resource. And you are drawing water from rivers which can be used for irrigation. You're actually plugging the water for farmers, and you also need food. I mean, like Neeta was pointing out, you need to grow a lot of food also. Our population is going to grow. So this sort of understanding and connect in a larger perspective is missing with people also. Again, when we say government, politicians, it's all people only. It's all us. When someone encroaches on the lake, they say the government is doing nothing. But who's the encroacher? One among us. Because they don't get a permission, they go and get a political arm in the game, or they go pay a bribe or do something to do a land conversion and get a permission. So everyone is into it, right? We can't just point a finger to anyone here. So I feel each one of us need to realize that this need is not like Chetan was saying, it's very, very fundamental, very basic. I mean, without water, what are you going to do? You cannot build palaces and not have water.
Will not live.
It's you just cannot live. So people have to understand this is a very basic need. You see, buildings and building is not development. Development is when very, very basic things are provided, basic needs are taken care of. That is true development. So when people talk smart cities, I really don't know what is the smartest thing we're doing for water today. I really
But-
wonder many times, like,
Yeah, the
we
definition
are
of smart is supposed to be, creating solutions for a problem that comes up easily.
yeah, and if you see, and
That
if
is
you
the
see
smart part of it.
people's behavior also, everyone is in this game of analyzing, pointing fingers, blame game. Well, if it comes down to what have you done in your own house or in your own factory or in your own school, there are no answers. So I think we should start questioning ourselves. And I really feel we are not, we are not powerful, or we don't have that kind of money, common man, but we definitely have the numbers. These numbers positively for us, right? Each one of us do something and we can create a huge impact. And each one of us can get right? Even the politician is going to listen to you. If they for a lake, don't you
Yeah.
think KTR Garu will come? 1,000 people stand up for something. Definitely.
Sure. Okay, I think from my side, at
So
least.
Kalpana, I think you just mentioned about schools.
Into it. We are the government, we are the politicians, we are everything. So I think we have to have that, we have to cross this bridge of this behavior change, and we have to start thinking environment. Most apartments tell me they don't have money to do rainwater harvesting pit. Not true. When you have few lakhs that you can generate for a Ganesh Chaturthi or any other celebrations in your community, a part of it can go towards rainwater harvesting. So basically, this is not priority for you. As long as you have the tap and the tanker, you think it's not your priority to think what I think we should start
Kalpana,
and
Chetan was saying
each
something.
one, yeah.
Yeah, Chetan.
No, I was just because Kalpana just brought in the factor of schools, right? See, we are talking about behavioral change as well, but see, even talking about even just the fundamental or the foundational awareness, right? I learned more about Greek history in school, but I learned zero about water. Again, it was from a different era. We've come a long way since then, but even today, are we taught about water scarcity? Or are we taught about the importance of saving water in our schools? I don't think so. See, in this country, UAE, because water is a priced commodity, so I get a bill for water. I am more conscious, and we teach our kids as well to be more conscious. But how many countries are there in the world like that who charge their citizens for water, and the citizens then become aware because they are paying a cost? So these factors come into play quite a bit, again, in different countries. But I think these have to be brought in at the fundamental and the foundational level in schools as well for our children.
Okay, I think questions from my side are done now. We've taken inputs from all the participants also. If anyone else has one or two questions, then we can take them now, or else we just go to conclusion. Karthik, would you like to take over from here?
Sure, sir. Since we're pressed for time, 1 second. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Naveen, Mrs. Sanjay, and our esteemed panelists, Ms. Neeta, Ms. Kalpana, and Mr. Chetan, for an engaging webinar and Q&A session. This episode of AquaTalks has given us an impressive insight into the minds of experts, their views on the current efforts being made towards water security, and the steps to be taken for a sustainable future. It is our duty as the most intelligent species to make the right choices while always keeping in mind the impact of our choice and what is best for the planet. Having reached the end of this episode, Maitri Aquatech thanks all the participants for attending and the panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us on this platform. Maitri Aquatech's AquaTalks will continue to be a regular knowledge-sharing webinar series, inviting experts just as those we have here today to share their thoughts and experiences and discuss all important things water. Once again, thank you everyone. Take care and stay water positive. See you again on the third Friday of the next month for episode 3.